My psychotic mom poisoned me and kept me prisoner for 18 years, so I escaped. Now she's showing up everywhere and contacting all my friends, claiming I'm having a mental breakdown. Ever since I was born, my mom never let me out of her sight. She brought me everywhere, to her hair appointments when I was 2, to her dates when I was 3. The first time she let me go to school, I was 9, and I felt like I'd been set free. But then she randomly signed me out during lunch. The following week, I begged her to let me stay for the whole school day to maybe make some friends, but she cried, telling me she was too lonely without me and needed me here. By 14, I had failed entire grades because of unexcused absences, and so I started rebelling. I began sneaking out at night, telling her no, and actually making friends that were not my mom. Coincidentally, right around this time, I got extremely sick. I had no way to prove it, but I knew she had slipped something into my food. She called some doctor she trusted before I even truly complained to her about feeling sick. The doctor came over, and with giving me as little specifics as possible, told me I had a rare neurological condition. Didn't even tell me what one, just said it would be too dangerous for me to keep leaving the house. Suddenly, I was on bed rest, enrolled in online school, and surrounded by humidifiers and immune support drinks my mom made from scratch. She was genuinely, almost creepily happy. You're safe now. This is how things were meant to be. I stayed this way for years, 0 in-person contact with anyone but her, 0 leaving the house. By the time I turned 18, I'd fully forgotten how to exist in a world without my mom. But I had this one friend, Jamie. We met in a forum for people with chronic illness. He was funny, kind, and always asked about me. He lived nearby and asked to meet up. I really wanted to, but I knew mom would flip out. So I came up with a plan. I told her I was heading to the corner store to grab an immunity drink. It was a 1-minute walk, and the only place in the world she let me go without her. When I got to the store, I met Jamie for the first time, and he was so friendly and down to earth. I was awkward as hell because I'd forgotten how to hang out with people, but he didn't mind. He took the lead in conversation and made me laugh so hard my sides hurt. I walked back home glowing. Jamie even walked me to the corner. But of course, my mom was there waiting. She flung the door open and screamed, "Who is that? Mom, he's just a friend. You lied to me," she said, shaking. "You risked your health. For a boy? I'm not sick," I said before I could stop myself. She slapped me. It wasn't hard, but it still stunned me. And for the first time in years, I defied her. I backed into my room and locked the door. She started banging on it so hard I thought it would break down. But then came silence. I texted Jamie instantly, telling him everything, and he stepped out big time. He helped me find an online therapist, helped me talk to a few mutual friends. They sent resources, links, emotional support. A few weeks later, I got the courage to move out. I found an apartment nearby in secret, and my new friends offered to help me move. I was ready, but my mom inevitably found out. I expected her to be angry, but instead, she resorted to manipulation, told me I was sick, I needed her with me. I was ungrateful for everything she's ever done for me. And I, for the first time ever, told her it was the opposite, that she needed me, that without me, her life was pathetic. That caused her to go nuts. She screamed, said she'd call social services and claim I was unfit to live alone, told me she'd never forgive me if I left, but I moved anyway, and the silence from her was music to my ears. The first thing I did once free was book an appointment with a new doctor. A week later, he called me back. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "There's no trace of the illness you were diagnosed with. In fact, it looks like you may have been ingesting something that mimics symptoms of neurological distress. Poison? A slow dosage. Over time. Have you taken any unusual supplements?" My whole world stopped. I had always suspected my mom was responsible for my illness, and now I had proof. My stomach turned. I walked back to my apartment slowly. When I got home, I found a package leaning against my door. No shipping label, just my name scrawled across the top in my mother's handwriting. My stomach clenched. I brought it inside and stared at it for a full 5 minutes before working up the courage to open it. The tape made a ripping sound that seemed too loud in my quiet apartment. Inside was my childhood teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, along with a handwritten letter and several bottles of the special supplements Mom had always given me. Mr. Buttons's fur was worn thin in places from years of being clutched during episodes, his glass eyes reflecting my horrified expression. The letter was 8 pages long, detailed in my mother's precise handwriting, detailing how worried she was, how I was making a terrible mistake, how I needed these medicines or I would relapse. "You'll start feeling the symptoms again soon," she wrote. "When you do, take these immediately and call me. I'll come get you. No questions asked." The paper was slightly damp in places, marked with what I assumed were tears. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. I grabbed the bottles and marched to the bathroom, unscrewing each cap and dumping the contents into the toilet. The colorful capsules and tablets swirled in the water before disappearing. Some floated briefly, their bright colors stark against the white porcelain. I flushed twice to make sure they were gone, watching until the water ran clear. Then I texted Jamie. She left medicine at my door. I flushed it. My hands were still shaking, the ghost of those pills lingering on my fingertips. His reply came quickly. "Good. Did you touch any of it?" "Number well, just the bottles." I looked down at my hands, suddenly paranoid. "Wash your hands anyway, and maybe call the police? This could be evidence." "I hadn't thought of that." "I will, thanks." I scrubbed my hands with soap until my skin turned red, the smell of lavender reminding me too much of home. I called the non-emergency police line and reported the package. The officer who took my call sounded bored, asking routine questions in a monotone voice. They said they'd send someone to collect it as evidence, but it might not be until tomorrow. I put everything back in the box and set it outside my door, unable to bear having it in my apartment any longer. That night, I had a nightmare about being trapped in my old bedroom, surrounded by humidifiers pumping out toxic mist while Mom stood in the doorway, smiling that satisfied smile. In the dream, down, the mist had a visible green tint, swirling around me like tentacles as I tried to scream. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom smell of those immune support drinks lingering in my nostrils. My phone showed 3:17 a.m. and a notification, an email from my mother. I know you're awake. You always wake up around 3. Your body is telling you something's wrong. Let me help you, baby. The blue light of the screen illuminated my dark bedroom, making the shadows seem deeper, more threatening. Ice flooded my veins. I crawled to the window and peeked through the blinds, the plastic slats cool against my fingertips. Sure enough, Mom's car was parked across the street, headlights off. I could make out her silhouette in the driver's seat, a darker shadow in the darkness. Was she watching my window? Could she see me peeking out? I called 911. My mother is stalking me, I told the dispatcher, my voice shaking. She's outside my apartment right now. She's been poisoning me for years. I reported it yesterday. The words tumbled out in a rush, sounding unbelievable even to my own ears. The dispatcher assured me they were sending someone. I stayed on the line, huddled in the corner of my bedroom where I couldn't be seen from any window. The carpet was rough against my bare legs as I made myself as small as possible, phone clutched to my ear like a lifeline. 10 minutes later, police lights flashed outside, painting my walls in alternating blue and red. I watched as 2 officers approached Mom's car. They talked for a while, their flashlight beams bouncing off the windows. She gestured animatedly, probably spinning some story about her poor, mentally ill daughter. One officer nodded sympathetically, while the other spoke into his radio. Eventually, they escorted her back to her car and watched as she drove away, her taillights disappearing around the corner. One officer came to my door. "Ms. Chen?" he called after knocking. "I'm Officer Lewis. Can you come to the door?" His voice was deep and authoritative. I opened it cautiously, still clutching my phone. "Your mother says she's concerned about your mental health," he said. His uniform smelled of starch and coffee, and his utility belt creaked as he shifted his weight. "Says you've stopped taking necessary medication and are having paranoid delusions." My heart sank. Of course she would say that. It was the perfect defense. Paint me as the unstable one. "That's not true. I filed a report yesterday. She's been poisoning me for years to make me think I was sick. I have a doctor who can confirm it." My voice sounded thin and desperate in the quiet hallway. Officer Lewis's expression softened slightly. "I see that note in the system now. Look, we told her she needs to leave the area and not return. If she comes back tonight, call us immediately. And you should file for a restraining order tomorrow." His flashlight cast long shadows down the hallway as he turned to leave. After he left, I couldn't go back to sleep. I sat up researching Munchausen by proxy syndrome until dawn broke, casting a pale golden light through my blinds. The stories I found were horrifyingly familiar. Mothers, usually, who made their children sick for attention, sympathy, or control. Some children died, some escaped, some never realized what had happened to them. The words on the screen blurred as I read case after case, recognizing my own experiences in the clinical descriptions. I was one of the lucky ones. I got out. I survived. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, both comforting and suffocating. The next morning, I went to the courthouse to file for a restraining order. The building was massive, all marble floors and echoing hallways that amplified every footstep. The process was confusing, the building massive and intimidating. I got lost twice before finding the right office, following signs with increasingly small print and confusing directions. "Do you have documentation of the abuse?" the clerk asked, looking bored. Her nails clicked against her keyboard as she barely glanced up at me. "I have medical records showing I was poisoned," I said, "and a police report from yesterday." My voice echoed slightly in the cavernous room, making me feel even smaller. She slid a stack of forms across the counter. "Fill these out, all of them. The judge reviews emergency petitions at 2 p.m. The papers were intimidatingly official, covered in legal jargon and tiny print. I sat in the waiting area, methodically working through the paperwork. The bench was hard and uncomfortable, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving me a headache. Some questions were easy: name, address, relationship to the abuser. Others were harder. Describe the most recent incident of abuse. Describe why you fear for your safety. List all previous incidents of abuse with approximate dates. How could I summarize a lifetime of manipulation in these tiny boxes? How could I explain that every "I love you" had been a chain, every special meal a dose of poison, every "you need me" a prison bar? I wrote until my hand cramped, the pen leaving indentations in my fingers where I gripped it too tightly. At 2:30, they called my name. The judge, an older woman with silver-streaked hair, reviewed my paperwork. Her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, and she smelled faintly of peppermint as she flipped through the pages. "This is a serious accusation," she said, peering at me over reading glasses. "Poisoning over a period of years." Her voice was neither sympathetic nor dismissive, just matter-of-fact. "Yes, Your Honor." My voice sounded small in the wood-paneled courtroom. "And you have medical evidence?" She held out her hand expectantly. I handed over the lab results my new doctor had given me. "These show traces of several substances in my system that shouldn't be there. My doctor believes they were administered consistently over a long period." The papers trembled slightly in my hand as I passed them over. She reviewed the papers, frowning. Her reading glasses reflected the overhead lights as she studied the documents. "I'm granting the temporary order. Your mother cannot contact you or come within 100 yards of you, your residence, or your workplace. We'll have a full hearing in 2 weeks where both parties can present evidence." The gavel made a sharp crack as she brought it down, making me jump. Relief washed over me. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate for what this meant, a legal shield between me and the person who had controlled my entire life. "Ms. Chen," she added as I turned to leave, "if these allegations are true, you should consider pressing criminal charges." Her eyes were kind but serious, the first real acknowledgement from an authority figure that what had happened to me was not just wrong but criminal. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The thought of my mother in handcuffs, In a courtroom. In prison. It was too much to process. The wooden doors of the courtroom felt heavy as I pushed them open, stepping back into the echoing hallway. The court officer served my mother with the restraining order that afternoon. By evening, my phone was blowing up with calls from relatives I barely knew and hadn't spoken to in years. The constant buzzing made me want to throw it against the wall. "Your mother is hysterical," said Aunt Diane, who I'd met maybe 3 times in my life. Her voice was accusatory, as if I'd done something terrible. "She says you've had some kind of mental break. We're all so worried." I could hear the television playing in the background of her call, as if this family crisis was just a minor interruption to her evening. "Honey, whatever fight you're having with your mom, this isn't the way to handle it," said Uncle Gary, who I didn't remember at all. His voice had that forced, jovial tone adults use when they're pretending everything is fine. "She devoted her life to caring for you," said my grandmother, who'd visited exactly once when I was 12. I remembered her briefly, a stern woman who'd inspected the house with pursed lips and asked pointed questions about my medications. How could you repay her like this? The guilt in her voice was thick enough to choke on. I let most calls go to voicemail, but I did talk to my grandmother. I tried to explain, but she interrupted. The phone felt hot against my ear as she spoke over me repeatedly. "Everyone knows you've been sick since you were little," she said. "Your mother kept us updated. The specialists, the treatments, the setbacks. She's shown us your medical records." Her voice had that same patronizing tone Mom used when explaining why I couldn't do normal things. "They were fake," I said. "Or the doctor was in on it. I'm seeing a new doctor now who says I was never sick." My voice rose with frustration, knowing she wasn't really listening. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice dripped with condescension. "That's your disease talking. Your mother warned us you might start rejecting your diagnosis." I could almost see her shaking her head sadly, believing every lie she'd been told. After we hung up, I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack before falling to the carpet. Of course, Mom had been laying groundwork for years, telling everyone how sick I was, how dedicated she was. She'd constructed an entire narrative where she was the saintly caretaker and I was the chronically ill, difficult child. And everyone believed her. The realization made me feel sick in a way no poison ever had. Jamie came over that evening with groceries and a determined expression. "We need to document everything," he said, unpacking vegetables I didn't know how to cook. Carrots, zucchini, bell peppers. Their bright colors looked alien in my bare kitchen. "Every symptom you had, every medicine she gave you, every doctor visit. We need a timeline." "What's the point?" I asked, slumped at my table. The wood was cool under my folded arms. "No one believes me. Even my own family thinks I'm having a psychotic break." "I believe you," he said firmly. "Your doctor believes you, and we're going to make sure everyone else does too." He pulled out a notebook and pen, setting them on the table with purpose. We spent hours creating a detailed timeline. It was painful, dredging up memories I'd rather forget, but also clarifying. The pages filled with dates, symptoms, and treatments, creating a visual record of the abuse I'd endured. Patterns emerged that I hadn't noticed before. "Look," Jamie said, pointing at our notes. His finger traced a line connecting several entries. "Your symptoms always got worse after you showed independence, when you wanted to stay at school, when you made friends online, when you talked about college." He was right. My condition had always flared up whenever I started pulling away from her. The timeline showed it clearly. Every attempt at normalcy followed by a mysterious decline, followed by increased dependence on her care. "And here," he continued, "your symptoms improved when you complied, when you agreed to drop out of school, when you stopped asking to go outside." His voice was gentle but firm, helping me see what had been invisible when I was living through it. A chill ran through me. She was training me, like a dog. The realization made me feel hollow inside. "She was controlling you," Jamie corrected gently, "but you broke free. You're breaking free." His hand rested briefly on mine, warm and reassuring. The next day, I had another appointment with my new doctor, Dr. Gupta. Her office was bright and airy, with actual plants in the corners and children's drawings pinned to a bulletin board. She ran more tests and asked more questions about my symptoms over the years. Her stethoscope was warm against my skin, not cold like Dr. Marshall's always was. "Based on what you've described and your test results, I believe you were being given a combination of substances," she said. Her voice was calm and professional, but her eyes were kind. "Likely including Ipecac to induce vomiting, laxatives to cause digestive distress, and possibly something like Vicine, which can cause dizziness and weakness when ingested." "Will there be permanent damage?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. My hands twisted nervously in my lap as I waited for her answer. "I don't think so. These substances typically don't cause long-term harm once exposure stops, but I'd like to monitor you for a while to be sure." She made notes in my chart, her handwriting neat and legible, unlike Dr. Marshall's deliberate scrawl. As I was leaving, Dr. Gupta handed me a card. "This is a support group for survivors of medical abuse. They meet Thursdays at the community center. It might help to talk to others who've been through similar experiences." The card was simple white cardstock with black text, nothing like the glossy pamphlets for alternative treatments Mom always collected. I took the card, doubtful but grateful. The thought of sharing my story with strangers made my palms sweat, but maybe people who'd been through it would understand in a way others couldn't. That Thursday, I forced myself to go. The community center was only a few blocks from my apartment, but it felt like miles. I'd never gone anywhere alone before moving out, except those brief walks to the corner store. Each step felt both terrifying and exhilarating, my heart pounding with anxiety and pride. The support group met in a small room with uncomfortable chairs arranged in a circle. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and someone had attempted to make the space more welcoming with a few potted plants and a table of refreshments. There were only 6 other people there, ranging from a teenager to an elderly man. Their faces showed varying degrees of wariness and resolve, expressions I recognized from my own mirror. The facilitator, a woman named Harper, welcomed me warmly. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Would you like to introduce yourself?" she asked after I sat down. The plastic chair creaked under my weight. I I hesitated, suddenly unsure what to say. Victim? Survivor? Daughter? The words stuck in my throat as everyone watched expectantly. I'm Betty. My mother has Munchausen by proxy. She made me sick for most of my life to keep me dependent on her. I just figured it out a few weeks ago. The words hung in the air, my truth finally spoken aloud to people who might understand. The others nodded in understanding. No shock, no disbelief, just recognition. Their eyes held the same haunted knowledge I saw in my own. When did you escape? Asked the elderly man. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes were sharp and kind. 3 weeks ago, I moved out, got a restraining order. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, each word a small victory. That's huge, said a woman about my age. Her hair was cut very short, and a scar peeked out from her collar. I didn't get away until I was 27. One by one, they shared their stories. Different details, but the same themes. Manipulation, isolation, medical procedures they didn't need, medications that made them worse instead of better. Some had been sick their entire childhoods, others for just a few years. All had that same look in their eyes, the look of someone who had been betrayed by the person who should have protected them most. The hardest part for me, said the teenager, her voice soft but determined, was accepting that my mom didn't love me the way a parent should, that her care was actually abuse. She twisted a bracelet around her wrist as she spoke, the beads clicking softly. I felt tears welling up. Sometimes I still miss her, I admitted. Is that crazy? After everything she did? The question had been burning inside me, making me doubt my own resolve. It's normal, Harper assured me. She was your whole world. It's okay to grieve that relationship, even while recognizing how toxic it was. Her words settled something inside me, giving permission for the complicated feelings I'd been fighting. I left the meeting feeling less alone. These people understood what even my own family couldn't. They didn't question my story or suggest I was overreacting. They just nodded and said, me too. It was the most validated I'd felt since this whole nightmare began. The next day, I received an email from Dr. Marshall, Mom's trusted doctor who had diagnosed me with that fake neurological condition. My hand shook as I opened it, the cursor hovering over the message for several seconds before I clicked. Dear Ms. Chen, I understand you've made certain allegations regarding your mother and the care you received under my supervision. I want to assure you that all treatments and diagnoses were medically sound based on the symptoms presented. However, I am retiring from practice next month and will be closing my patient files. If you wish to obtain copies of your medical records, please contact my office within the next 2 weeks. Sincerely, Edward Marshall, MD. The formal language couldn't hide what was really happening. He was running, covering his tracks. The computer screen glowed accusingly as I read the email 3 times, anger building with each reading. I forwarded the email to Jamie with the message. He's running. The keyboard clacked loudly as I typed, my fingers pressing the keys harder than necessary. Jamie called immediately. This is good, actually. It means he's scared. We should get those records before he loses them. His voice was excited, seeing the opportunity I'd missed through my anger. The next day, we went to Dr. Marshall's office together. It was in a small, dingy building I remembered all too well. The waiting room smelled of old magazines and cheap air freshener, and the chairs were the same uncomfortable vinyl they'd always been. The receptionist, a new one I didn't recognize, had me fill out a records request form. Her nails were long and brightly colored, clicking against the keyboard as she processed my request. There's a $25 processing fee, she said. I handed over the cash, wondering how many other fake patients had passed through these doors, how many other families had been deceived. It'll take a few days, she added. We'll call when they're ready. She handed me a carbon copy of the request form, the paper thin and easily tearable. As we were leaving, the door to the back office opened, and Dr. Marshall himself stepped out. He froze when he saw me, his face paling beneath his tan. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his hair grayer. Betty, he said, recovering quickly. How are you feeling? His smile didn't reach his eyes, and I noticed a slight tremor in his hand as he clutched a patient file. Better, I said coldly. Much better since I stopped taking the treatments you and my mother were giving me. The words felt like stones in my mouth, hard and satisfying to spit out. His smile tightened. I'm glad you're doing well. If you'll excuse me, I have a patient waiting. He tried to step around me, but I moved to block his path. Did you know? I asked before he could escape. Did you know she was poisoning me? Or did she fool you too? My voice was steady despite the rage bubbling inside me. He glanced at the receptionist who was watching with undisguised interest. Her fingers paused over her keyboard. I think you're confused about your medical history. Perhaps we could discuss this privately sometime. His cologne was too strong, cloying, and artificial. No need, I said. The police will be contacting you soon enough. I felt a small thrill of satisfaction as his professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fear beneath. His face hardened. Be careful about making unfounded accusations, Betty. They could be considered defamatory. The threat was clear in his voice, but it didn't frighten me the way it once might have. Jamie put his hand on my arm, gently pulling me toward the door. We should go. His touch was light but grounding, reminding me we had a plan. Outside, I was shaking with rage. The sunlight seemed too bright after the dim office, and car horns blared in the distance. He knew. He had to know. My voice trembled with emotion. We'll get the records, Jamie said, and then we'll have proof one way or the other. His calm confidence steadied me, helping me focus on the next step rather than my anger. 3 days later, I got a call from Dr. Marshall's office. My records were ready. When I went to pick them up, I was handed a thin folder containing barely a dozen pages. The receptionist avoided eye contact as she passed them over. This can't be everything, I said to the receptionist. I was his patient for 3 years. The folder felt insultingly light in my hands. She shrugged. That's all we have in your file. Her indifference was practiced, professional. I flipped through the sparse documentation, basic intake forms, a few vague notes about neurological symptoms of unknown origin, prescriptions for vitamins and supplements, nothing that would raise red flags, nothing about the specialized treatments Mom had claimed I was receiving, nothing about the extensive tests Dr. Marshall had supposedly run. They'd sanitized my records, or maybe they'd never kept accurate records in the first place. Either way, the evidence I'd hoped for wasn't there. The pages felt flimsy and inadequate in my hands, much like the medical care I'd received. I took the folder to the police station and added it to my case file, explaining my suspicions. The detective assigned to my case, a tired-looking woman named Detective Perez, listened patiently. Her office was small and cluttered, with case files stacked in precarious piles and family photos crowded onto a small shelf. Without more evidence, it's going to be difficult to prove criminal intent, she said. Your mother could claim she genuinely believed you were ill and was trying alternative treatments she thought would help. Her honesty was disappointing but not surprising. She knew exactly what she was doing, I insisted. And so did Dr. Marshall. My voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. I believe you, Detective Perez said. But believing and proving in court are different things. We'll keep investigating, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility that criminal charges might not stick. She made a note in my file, her handwriting cramped and efficient. I left the station feeling defeated. The afternoon sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. That night, I had another nightmare about being trapped in my old bedroom. But this time, when I tried to scream, no sound came out. I clawed at my throat, feeling something thick and viscous blocking my airway. Mom stood in the doorway, smiling serenely as I choked. I woke up gasping, my throat tight with phantom pain. My bedsheets were twisted around my legs like restraints, damp with sweat. My phone showed a notification, a new email from my mother, somehow sent despite the restraining order. I found your old medical journals. Remember how I had you track your symptoms? Such detailed records. Would be a shame if the court saw how you documented your own illness in your handwriting. Come home and we can work this out as a family. The words glowed menacingly in the darkness of my bedroom. I recognized the threat immediately. Mom had made me keep those journals for years, recording every headache, every dizzy spell, every stomach pain in excruciating detail. Of course, I now realized those symptoms appeared after she gave me her special treatments, but the journals themselves would seem to confirm her story that I'd been chronically ill. They were written in my own hand, page after page of symptoms I'd actually experienced, even if the cause had been her poisoning rather than any real disease. I forwarded the email to Detective Perez with shaking hands, then called Jamie. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. She's not going to stop, I said when he answered. She's threatening to use my symptom journals against me. My voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. That's actually good, Jamie said, surprising me. I heard rustling as he sat up in bed. It proves she's still trying to manipulate and control you, which supports your case. And those journals might help us more than hurt us if we can show the symptoms always appeared after she gave you something. His logic was sound, but it did little to calm the panic rising in my chest. Maybe, I said, unconvinced. But what if people believe her? What if they think I'm making all this up for attention? The thought made me feel sick, that I could escape physically but still be trapped by her narrative. Then they're wrong, Jamie said simply, and we'll keep fighting until we find people who believe the truth. His certainty was comforting, even if I couldn't fully share it. The next day, I forced myself to go to the corner store, needing to prove I could still function despite my fear. The familiar walk felt different now, both comforting in its routine and terrifying in its exposure. The sidewalk was damp from an early morning rain, and puddles reflected the cloudy sky. As I was paying for a bottle of water, I glanced out the window and froze. Mom was sitting in her car across the street watching the store. Her blue sedan was parked under a tree, partially obscured by branches, but unmistakable. I ducked behind a display, heart pounding. She was violating the restraining order. I should call the police. But what if she left before they arrived? What if they didn't believe me again? I texted Jamie. She's outside the corner store, watching. Then I called 911, keeping my voice low as I explained the situation. The candy display I was hiding behind smelled strongly of chocolate and artificial fruit flavors, making me slightly nauseated. The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way but advised me to stay inside the store where it was safe. I peeked around the display. Mom was still there, staring at the store entrance with an intensity that made my skin crawl. She'd always had that look when she was determined to get her way. When I begged to stay at school, when I asked to go to a friend's house, when I said I wanted to try going to college. It was the look that usually preceded a new episode of my condition. The store owner, Mr. Kumar, noticed my distress. "Everything okay, miss?" His voice was kind, his accent thick. He'd known me for years as the sickly girl who only came to buy small items with her mother's permission. "My mother is outside," I whispered. "There's a restraining order. She's not supposed to be near me." The words felt strange to say aloud to someone who had seen us together so many times. He frowned and moved to the window. "The blue sedan?" His expression darkened as he recognized the car. I nodded. "Stay in the back," he said, gesturing to the storage area behind the counter. "Police coming?" "Yes." I huddled in the storage room, surrounded by boxes of inventory, feeling like a child hiding from a monster. The space smelled of cardboard and various snack foods, and a small fan whirred in the corner. Through a small window, I could see the street. Police lights appeared, and 2 officers approached Mom's car. Their uniforms were dark against the gray day, badges catching what little sunlight broke through the clouds. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see Mom gesturing frantically, pointing at the store. One officer stayed with her while the other came inside. "Betty Chen?" he called. His voice echoed slightly in the small store. I emerged from the back room. "That's me." My legs felt unsteady as I walked toward him. "I'm Officer Martinez. Your mother claims she was just driving by and stopped to make a phone call. Says she didn't know you were in here." His expression was neutral, professional. "That's a lie," I said. This is the only store I ever go to. She knows that. She only let me walk here for years. Nowhere else. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, conviction overriding fear. Officer Martinez's expression shifted slightly. We're going to take her in for violating the restraining order. Would you be willing to come to the station to make a statement? He pulled out a small notebook, pen poised. I nodded, relief washing over me. Finally, someone was taking this seriously. The weight of constant vigilance lifted slightly from my shoulders. At the station, I gave my statement while Mom was processed in another room. The interview room was small and plain, with uncomfortable chairs and a table bolted to the floor. Detective Perez appeared, looking slightly less tired than before. Her coffee mug had a chip in the rim, and she set it down carefully as she reviewed my statement. This helps your case, she said. Shows a pattern of stalking and harassment. The DA might be more willing to pursue charges now. She made notes in my file, adding to the growing documentation of my mother's behavior. As I was leaving, I glimpsed Mom being led to a holding cell. Our eyes met briefly. Hers were filled not with anger or even shame, but with a terrible, possessive love that chilled me to the bone. It was the same look she'd had when I was sick in bed, completely dependent on her care. You'll come back to me, she mouthed. You always do. Her confidence was absolute, as if my escape was just a temporary inconvenience. I turned away, walking out into the sunlight, determined to prove her wrong. The station doors felt heavy as I pushed through them, symbolic of the weight I was leaving behind. That night, Jamie and several friends came over with pizza and board games, a normal young adult hangout they'd organized to help me experience the social life I'd missed. The apartment filled with the smell of cheese and tomato sauce, and the sound of laughter seemed to brighten the space. It was awkward at first. I didn't know the games, didn't get the jokes, didn't understand the references to movies and shows I'd never been allowed to watch, but they were patient. Autumn explained the rules of each game twice without making me feel stupid. Her purple hair caught the light as she leaned forward to move game pieces, showing me strategies without taking over. Lewis paused to clarify pop culture references, never making me feel left out for not knowing what everyone else seemed to take for granted. Cameron asked questions about what I liked, genuinely interested in getting to know me, treating me like a person with preferences and opinions worth hearing. By the end of the night, I was laughing, really laughing, for what felt like the first time in my life. My cheeks hurt from smiling, a strange but wonderful sensation. The pizza boxes were empty, cards and game pieces scattered across the table, and I felt something unfamiliar, belonging. After everyone left, Jamie stayed to help clean up. We moved around the small kitchen, putting away leftovers and washing glasses, falling into an easy rhythm. Thank you, I said, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. The words felt inadequate for the lifeline he'd thrown me. You would have figured it out, he said confidently. You're stronger than you think. He stacked plates in the sink, the ceramic clinking softly. I don't feel strong. I feel scared all the time. I folded a napkin into smaller and smaller squares, not meeting his eyes. Being scared and being strong aren't mutually exclusive. He gathered the pizza boxes. The fact that you're scared but doing it anyway, that's the definition of courage. His words settled over me like a warm blanket. I thought about that after he left. Maybe he was right. Maybe getting out of bed each morning, walking to the corner store, filing police reports, attending support groups. Maybe all of it was courage I hadn't recognized in myself. The apartment was quiet but not lonely, the silence peaceful rather than oppressive. 2 days later, I received a call from Aunt Diane. Betty, I need to tell you something about your mother. Her voice was different than during our last conversation. Hesitant, almost guilty. I tensed. What about her? I sat down on the couch, preparing myself for another defense of Mom's actions. When you were little, before you got sick, she did the same thing to your father. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I sank deeper into the couch. What? The single word was all I could manage as my mind raced to process this new information. He was healthy when they met. Then he started having all these mysterious symptoms. Doctors couldn't figure it out. Your mother took care of him, managed all his medications. He got worse and worse. Aunt Diane's voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through after years of silence. My mouth went dry. What happened to him? Mom had always told me my father abandoned us when I was a baby, that he couldn't handle having a family, that he'd chosen freedom over responsibility. The photograph she kept of him showed a thin, pale man with kind eyes that, I now realized, looked a lot like mine. He died when you were 2. They said it was complications from his illness. I never suspected anything then, but after what you're saying about your own experience, I found something. I was cleaning out my attic and found a box of your dad's things that your mother gave me after he died. There's a journal. He was documenting his symptoms, but also his suspicions. He wrote that he felt better whenever your mother went away for a few days, worse when she came back. The revelation landed like a physical blow. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Do you still have it? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. Yes. And I'll testify at the hearing if you need me to. I should have seen it sooner. I'm so sorry, Betty. Her remorse seemed genuine, though it came decades too late. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, processing this new information. My father, another victim, maybe the first, but not the last. Had she called him? Had she been practicing on him before turning to me? The questions swirled in my mind, each more horrifying than the last. I called Detective Perez's direct line and left a voicemail about what I'd learned. Then I texted Jamie, my father. She did it to him too. He died. The words looked stark and terrible on the screen. His response came immediately. I'm coming over. No questions, no platitudes, just support. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be alone with this knowledge, with the realization that my mother's sickness went back further than I'd imagined, that it had already claimed one life. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in as I waited, the shadows taking on sinister shapes. Jamie arrived 20 minutes later. We sat on my couch in silence for a while, his presence a comfort I couldn't articulate. The distant sounds of traffic and neighbors living their normal lives filtered through the walls, a reminder that the world continued despite my personal horror. She's never going to stop, I finally said. Even if I get the permanent restraining order, Even if they charge her with abuse, she'll keep trying to get to me. The certainty settled in my bones, cold and heavy. Then we'll keep stopping her, Jamie said, every time, until she gives up or is put somewhere she can't reach you. His determination was fierce, his belief in our ability to win this battle unwavering. I nodded, wanting to believe him, but deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. It wouldn't be over until one of us was gone. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, it hardened something inside me. I had survived her poisoning. I had escaped her control. I would survive this too. The day of the permanent restraining order hearing arrived. I put on my yellow sundress, my small act of defiance, and went to court. The fabric felt lighter now, more familiar against my skin. Jamie, Autumn, and Louis came with me for support, a small army of friends I never thought I'd have. Aunt Diane met us there, carrying a worn leather journal. Your dad's, she said, handing it to me. I've marked the relevant pages. The leather was soft from handling, the pages yellowed with age. I clutched it like a lifeline. Here was proof I wasn't crazy, that Mom had done this before, that I wasn't her first victim. The journal felt heavy with the weight of truth. Mom arrived with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. She was dressed conservatively, hair pulled back, wearing minimal makeup, the picture of a concerned mother, not the manipulative abuser I knew her to be. Her shoes clicked sharply on the marble floor as she approached, each step measured and deliberate. When she saw me, her face crumpled into a practiced expression of maternal concern. Betty, honey, she called across the courtroom. It's not too late. We can fix this. Her voice had that familiar coaxing tone she used when trying to get me to take my medicine. I turned away, focusing on the judge's empty bench. The courtroom smelled of furniture polish and anxiety, and the wooden seats were hard and uncomfortable. The hearing began. My lawyer presented the evidence, medical records showing no trace of the neurological condition I'd supposedly had for years, test results indicating substances in my system consistent with poisoning, the police report from Mom's restraining order violation, testimony from Dr. Gupta about my improving health since moving out. Then Aunt Diane testified, presenting my father's journal as evidence of a pattern of behavior going back years. The courtroom was silent as she read entries describing symptoms identical to those I'd experienced, followed by suspicions that grew stronger as his health deteriorated. Mom's lawyer tried to paint me as mentally unstable, claiming I'd stopped taking necessary medication and was experiencing paranoid delusions as a result. He presented the symptom journals I'd kept, pointing to my own documentation of illness. The pages looked strange projected on the courtroom screen, my childish handwriting detailing suffering that had been deliberately inflicted. These are in Ms. Chen's own handwriting, he argued. Pages and pages detailing symptoms she now claims were fabricated. His voice was smooth and reasonable, making my truth sound like the delusion. I wrote what I experienced, I testified when it was my turn. The witness stand felt exposed, all eyes on me as I spoke. But those symptoms always appeared after consuming food or drinks my mother prepared specially for me, and they improved when I wasn't living with her, like when I stayed overnight at the hospital for tests. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, the truth flowing more easily now that I understood it myself. The judge asked pointed questions, reviewing the evidence carefully. Her reading glasses reflected the overhead lights as she made notes, her expression giving nothing away. Mom testified last, tears streaming down her face as she described her years of sacrifice, caring for her chronically ill child. Her performance was flawless. The devoted mother, heartbroken by her child's inexplicable rejection. I gave up everything for her, she sobbed, and now she's turned against me because of these new friends filling her head with lies. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of maternal suffering. The judge called a brief recess to review all the evidence. I sat in the hallway, trembling with exhaustion and anxiety. The marble bench was cold through my dress, and people walked past with curious glances. Whatever happens, Jamie said, sitting beside me, you've already won. You're free. You know the truth. His shoulder pressed against mine, solid and reassuring. I nodded, clinging to that thought as we were called back in for the judge's decision. The courtroom fell silent as she shuffled her papers, preparing to speak. Based on the evidence presented, the judge began, I find sufficient cause to grant a permanent restraining order. Ms. Chen Sr. is to have no contact with Ms. Chen Jr. and must remain at least 500 yards away from her person, residence, and place of employment or education. Her voice was firm and clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Relief washed over me, the first official acknowledgement that I needed protection from the woman who should have protected me. The judge continued, I am also referring this case to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges, including assault, poisoning, and child abuse. She looked directly at my mother as she spoke, her expression stern. Mom let out a wail that made my skin crawl, the same sound she'd made when I told her I was moving out. Her lawyer put a restraining hand on her arm, but she shook him off, rising from her seat. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the desperation beneath. You can't do this to me, she screamed, looking at me rather than the judge, her face contorted with rage and something like panic. After everything I've done for you, you'd be nothing without me. You'll come crawling back when you get sick again, and you will get sick. Spittle flew from her mouth as she shouted. Court officers moved toward her as her voice rose to a shriek. You need me! You need me! Her words echoed in the high-ceilinged room as they took her by the arms. As they escorted her out, still screaming, I sat frozen, her words echoing in my head. For a moment, a sliver of doubt crept in. What if she was right? What if I did get sick again? What if I couldn't survive without her? The old programming tried to reassert itself, years of conditioning telling me I was helpless, dependent, broken. Then Jamie's hand found mine, warm and solid. You don't need her, he whispered. You never did. His fingers intertwined with mine, anchoring me to the present, to the truth. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The sun was warm on my face, and a slight breeze carried the scent of nearby flowering trees. The restraining order was a victory, but I knew this wasn't truly over. Mom would find ways to reach me, to try to pull me back into her orbit. The criminal investigation would mean more statements, more evidence, more confrontations. But for now, I had won this battle. I had spoken my truth and been believed. I had taken one more step away from her shadow and into the light of my own life. The future stretched before me, uncertain but mine to shape. I pulled out my phone and blocked every unknown number that had contacted me in the past weeks. Then I deleted my mother's contact information entirely. The action was small but significant, cutting one more tie that bound us. "What now?" Jamie asked as we walked down the courthouse steps. Sunlight glinted off the polished stone, almost blindingly bright after the dim interior. I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling the weight of the future, my future, stretching out before me. Possibilities I'd never considered suddenly seemed within reach. College, travel, friendships, a normal life. "Now I figure out who I am," I said, without her. The words tasted like freedom, sweet, terrifying, and completely mine.